going to run this thing quick. I've got a lot of questions written down. Oh, I brought it. Good evening. This is the October 4th Seminole County Planning and Zoning Commission meeting. My name is Carissa Lawhon, chairman for tonight's meeting. Please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
This board is a 7-member board appointed by the Board of County Commissioners. A quorum has been established to hold tonight's meeting. Public hearing items acted upon by this board are referred back to the Board of County Commissioners for further consideration. Board members present tonight are Carissa Lawhon, Vice Chairman Dan Lopez, Commissioner Tim Smith, Commissioner Stephen Smith, and Commissioner Mike Lorenz. Staff present tonight are Rebecca Hammock, Development Services Director, Desmond Morrell, Senior Assistant County Attorney, Vladimir Simonovsky, Professional Engineer, Development Review, Annie Silaway, Senior Planner, Maya Athenis, Senior Planner, Tyler Reed, Senior Planner, Eliza Harris-Giuliano, Consultant from Kimberly Horn and Associates, and Tammy Brushwood, our P&Z Board Clerk. Tonight's meeting will go as follows. Staff will introduce each item. The applicant will present the item. Audience members wishing to speak will then be heard. Please complete a comment card and give it to the clerk if you wish to speak. Comment cards are located out in the lobby. Speakers should restrict their comments to information directly related to the item being heard. Audience speakers will all have 3 minutes to speak, or 6 minutes if you're representing an official group such as an HOA. When called, speakers should approach the microphone, provide their name and address for the record, and the board may ask questions of the speaker. After all speakers have been heard, public comment will be closed. The applicant will be given a chance for rebuttal. Any items that are shown, such as videos, presentations, pictures, or maps, must be left with the clerk for the public record. Items shown from electronic devices should be arranged to be emailed to Tammy. A motion will be made and then seconded. Board discussion may occur and will conclude with a vote. I will request a roll call vote for any split votes tonight. We'll begin with our first item on the agenda, the proof of publication. Do I have a motion?
You have a motion?
Second.
Motion, second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Okay, proof of publication is approved. Next, we'll move on to the minutes from last meeting. Do I have a motion?
I'll make a motion.
Second.
Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Seeing none, the motion passes. Public hearing items tonight. Item number 1, Tri-State Towing PD rezone. It will be Annie Silaway presenting.
Good evening, Annie Silaway, Senior Planner, Development Services. The applicant is requesting a rezone from A1 Agriculture to PD Plan Development to develop the subject property as an office and warehouse with an accessory use of a tow yard. The master development plan includes 800 square feet of office and 3,500 square feet of warehouse for a maximum building size of 4,300 square feet and a maximum building height of 35 feet. Approximately 10,000 square feet of the subject site will be utilized as outdoor vehicle storage for a towing company, which will be enclosed by a 6-foot-high opaque fence. The towing company currently operates with 6 tow trucks and provides roadside assistance to the general public, as well as emergency response service for public safety, fire, and police. The proposed hours of operation are Monday through Friday from 8 a.m. to 6 p.m. and a 24-hour drop-off for emergency response. All the properties on the west side of West State Road 426 lying south of West Chapman Road and north of Aloma Woods Boulevard have an industrial future land use. The purpose and intent of the existing future land use designation is to identify locations for a variety of heavy commercial and industrial uses oriented towards wholesale distribution, storage, and manufacturing and other industrial uses. The applicant will be providing 20% open space, adequate buffers along the south and the east portions of the site, and the applicant is only proposing an FAR of .10, which is less intense than the maximum allowable .65 FAR permitted under the future land use. Access to get to the site has an existing cross-access easement that was established back in 2003, and the applicant will provide a cross-access easement to the property adjacent to the south. Staff finds the request to be consistent with the comprehensive plan and Seminole County Land Development Code and compatible with the surrounding trend of development in the area. Staff recommends the Board of County Commissioners adopt the proposed ordinance enacting a rezone and approve the associated master development plan and development order from A1 Agriculture to PD Plan Development on approximately .92 acres located on the west side of West State Road 426, approximately 800 feet north of Connection Point. And that concludes my presentation.
Thank you, Annie.
Thank you.
Any questions of staff?
Yeah, I just have one. Is this office warehouse that's just north of there? The adjoining property? Mm-hmm. So it's just all office warehouse?
Yes, so properties to the north are office and warehouse
Okay.
uses.
All right, thank you.
Yes.
I had
I'm sorry,
one clarification on the access.
clarification.
I don't know if I was clear on how they're going to access the property.
They're going to access to the north through the north
Through
parcel, which
The existing. Go ahead.
So this property up on the master development plan will be accessing to the north through an existing developed property.
Understood. Okay. Thank you.
Okay. You're welcome. Anything else?
Any other questions of staff? Okay.
No.
Is the applicant present?
There. Yes.
Good evening, Kim Fisher on behalf of the owner. I don't have a presentation, but I am here for questions and for rebuttal if needed.
Thank you very much. Questions of the applicant?
I don't have any.
All right. We have one member of the audience here tonight in support of this item. She does not wish to speak, but wants to voice her support. And I have two comment cards in opposition. So let's have Sandy Veal. Vial, is that correct? Come on up.
Sandy Veely, 301 Carolyn Drive, Oviedo. I am here today as both a concerned citizen and a partner at Oviedo Commerce Center. That's the property to the north. I'll refer to it as OCC. I have been an Oviedo resident for over 35 years. I became a partner at OCC following my husband's passing in 2021. In the beginning of the project, my late husband, George Veely, his major role, he was the developer. He developed the land. After that, after the project was completed, he became the broker. The integrity of our center is of utmost importance to us, my partners and I. When my late husband took calls regarding a vacant space, the first question was, what kind of business? What do you want to put in here? He needed to make sure the fit was right for the health of the center, and of course, the business type needed to be right, which was allowed to be there. We were denied heavy industrial uses from the beginning of that property. Oviedo Commerce Center is a thriving, fully leased facility. Our tenant mix is optimal, and most importantly, our tenants are satisfied and are able to run successful businesses. My fear, the impact to both our tenants and the driveway access is going to be devastating to the center if this application is approved. My fear, tenants not renewing their leases, moving out, and we will just have an empty building. I strongly oppose this application on behalf of myself, the businesses, and their employees. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next, we have Glenn Leffler on behalf of the Oviedo Commerce Center.
Thank you. My name is Glenn Leffler. I live at 2401 South Atlantic Avenue, New Smyrna Beach, Florida. My relationship to Oviedo Commerce Center, I was George Veely's partner. George came to me back in 2000, plus or minus 2001, said he had a project ready to go, could you help get it financed and be a partner, and off we went. Part of our zoning requirement was we had to enter in the PD. There was some talk about the DOT and maybe the county not wanting so many curb cuts on 426, maybe having a lot to do with a bike path that was coming through about the same time. So we had maybe a cross-access with Oviedo Storage to our immediate north, but we only share a driveway. It might be from here to the wall, and you either go to the storage place or you go to ours. We don't go through theirs, they don't go through ours. You share, boom, you go. The cross-access easement was part of what we had to give to get our PD approved. We gave it. We didn't know we were going to have a heavy industrial use next to us. We're light industrial. If you went to Oviedo Commerce Center, and I understand you haven't been able to be there yet, Ms. Silway, but it's a very nice glass front, office-type buildings on the front, light industrial in the back. It's almost not industrial. It's a mix of about 9 tenants, probably 60, 70 employees total. It's 100% leased, and that's our concern. I don't know how we prevent down the future, all of a sudden, this project is there and our tenants aren't renewing leases. We're 100%. We've been 100% for years. We don't lose tenants. That's our primary concern, not that there's development next door to us, it's what goes next door. I've been to a Tri-County towing facility on Lyman, I believe. Vehicles everywhere, chain link fence at the other facility. If that's Tri-County or Tri-State, this says Tri-State, I don't know if they're Tri-County or what, I believe they are. But we were not allowed to do heavy truck repair, truck or bus repair, or storage. And as Sandy said, George was very diligent about what could go in there, what couldn't go in there, and to keep harmony. And regardless of how staff and the development order are presented, it's an auto record tow yard. That's our belief. We could be wrong, but we don't believe it's compatible with our use. We're not heavy industrial. There's office building, residential. I don't know of any other than, like Ms. Silway says, maybe to the far west. The insult to injury is that every day they're going to drive through our project. Heavy tow trucks towing another truck, I don't know what, I'm not sure anybody does. But every day they got to come through, pass in front of our main tenant, pass through Massey Services. And I don't know if my tenants start saying, hey, I'm not renewing, and the reason is, ever since you let this move in, it's not the same here. We could lose millions of dollars, and that's not exaggeration. You lose tenants, you put a cap rate on it. We don't think consideration has been given to the Oviedo Commerce Center, its employees and its tenants. And speaking on myself as a partner and the businesses there and the employees and for safety of everyone and that bike path, we strongly oppose this application, and we think it's an incredibly inadequate development order. And we think it needs to go back to drawing board at a minimum, but
I got one question. Is this where City Electric is?
they used to be there. They used to be in the back.
Okay, they were in the back? Okay.
Correct.
I
And we sort of chased them
familiarized
away
myself.
because they were putting storage outside. They had pipes out there. We go, guys, you can't do that, And that was part of it. And they were growing, and we said, you got to go somewhere else.
Yeah, okay. I just wanted to see if it was
We have a
the same
dance place
shopping-
in there.
Same plaza?
Yeah, that's the place.
Okay, thank you.
Other than the drive-through traffic, which I can understand, the applicant's only proposing a 5-foot buffer in between your property and this one. What is able to be seen by your tenants of, what do you have there along, do you have the offices where people could see, or your tenants could see, your customers, like a tow yard?
Yes.
Or what is there along your south border?
So what the applicant is proposing is a 6-foot opaque fence around the entire
okay.
property.
That's different than what's in the staff report.
Included on top of that, a 5-foot buffer.
Oh, okay.
Now, the way our buffer code is structured is that we base it off of the future land use. So the tenant to the north, which is the Oviedo Commerce Center, is industrial future land use. So they're providing a 5-foot width buffer that's going to be sodded, but we are proposing a 15-foot along the east and a 5-foot buffer along the south, as well as an opaque fence. And there will be a gate, security gate in front to get back to the storage yard.
Got you.
Can I ask you one question, sir? The back of that south building, is there windows? Is there anything that visually backs up to that property?
No, not right here. This looks like probably our back building, and it's metal back here, just egress doors and some grass.
Yeah.
There are some office windows here for Massey, and they're all office here, office up here. So every day, they're gonna come in right here and go past their 2 tenants, tow trucks, whatever. I don't know what it'll turn into, but again, how do you tell me that I've gone from 100% leased, and then I get tenants in the near future saying, we can't renew, we can't stay here. This is totally different. And I could easily lose a couple $1 million on the value of that project. You know, it's all based on income and cap rates, you probably know that. It's a small nightmare to us right now. Looking at what we are in the surrounding area, like I said, Windsong, I believe is a residential development, immediately out our front door and to our south, 1/8 of a mile maybe. I believe in office buildings across the way, more office. I don't think you see any industrial for the most part to the north. We talked about this a little bit ago. But I know what you're talking about to the west and past, almost toward the 417 is this one you were talking about. Because the 417 is back here. This is 426. 417 is back here.
Okay. All right.
And there is a little more industrial there. We also have a wetlands back there. We've got a pond back there where otters live. I think it's the total wrong use here against what we have.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good?
Yes.
Thank you.
We're going to do applicant rebuttal, but I have a question of staff. Oh, I'm sorry. One more on this item, actually. Kimberly Wilson? Kimberly first. Annie, I'm sorry, can I ask you a quick question here? Show us the access again. Is this going to go in front of the Massey
So
or in
I'll-
between through the whole
If I can
complex?
move over there, I'll point to it. It's, so, it's coming right from here. So they're coming through the Oviedo Commerce Center and down into here,
Okay.
okay?
So more in front of than all through the complex?
Correct, that is in front of, so this is paving right here, excuse me if you don't mind. This is paving right here, this is the building, and the driveway's just to the north above where you can't see. You come in there, come down here, you either go there to the back or you keep going to Massey.
Okay.
Every day, these 2 tenants, mostly office up front.
I
don't know what they're
can-
gonna deal with.
I
And there's some question too about who owns what land right here. They first came to me wanting to buy something, then they disappeared about it. There's a lot to it.
Okay,
I'll
thank
stay
you.
here in case you have more questions.
Jamie, you had a
Yeah,
question?
I have one question. This right-of-way that goes through this complex, is it a county-maintained right-of-way, or is it a private
No.
right-of-way?
It's ours. We maintain it.
Private.
It's a cross-access easement.
Okay.
We were required to give you to help you with the bike path, less curb cuts, et cetera.
So,
But we never envisioned this coming through.
So the access off of 426, as you can see, is a circled area.
Okay.
You can turn off of 426, and then you want to head south where the red line is going, and then where the star is, that's the property. Can you guys see that okay?
Yeah, so you're not actually going into the complex, correct?
Well, you are.
No, You're going
100%.
you're going through the driveway access. You're not going in between the,
Cars
and you're
on
not
either side of where they're going to drive through. Sorry to interrupt you, but as you drive a tow truck through, cars. One side's the office building.
I'm having trouble visualizing that. Okay, I see it now.
Annie, what is the question about ownership of that little triangle right in front? Because it pretty clearly looks like on your map that it would be the Oviedo Commerce Center.
it is.
Okay. All right, very good. Thank you. Let's conclude public comment. So, Ms. Wilson, you want to come up and speak? I don't want to get out of order here.
Yes, good evening, board members. My name is Kimberly Wilson. Thank you for the opportunity to come before this board and hear my comments and concerns. If you would indulge me just for one moment, and I have a few questions for all of you, and show the affirmative with a raised answer for a yes answer. How many of you live here, right here in Seminole County?
All of us do.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
How many of you live in Oviedo? None? Okay.
I do.
I guess that's just me. And how many of you live 500 feet away from this proposed amendment and rezoning? That would be me, the one right across the way. So as a 20-plus year resident of Oviedo, I moved here for the same reasons that so many newcomers are coming to our beautiful state. We have great weather, we have great schools, we have a great active lifestyle, and wonderful outdoor activities with numerous parks and walking trails. Please note, I am not against development or progress, but progress without proper planning equals disaster for those who have to live among it or across from it. I respectfully request that the zoning remain as it is and not be rezoned for this project. According to my letter, the current zoning on this includes single-family, neighborhood, public, private elementary school, and nurseries and greenhouses. With the proposed development, it will allow for a warehouse, office, and a towing yard. This would directly affect safety. It is currently on the bike trail. It would increase traffic on this already busy road and area. It would affect property values, showing removal of trees and having a towing yard right across the street from me. It would affect the enjoyment of the residential area right across the street. A towing business operates on a 24-hour clock. Again, this leads to disruption, noise, and additional traffic. This is already an extremely busy street. Many times I can't even get out of my own neighborhood. Many drivers use our entrance as a U-shaped turning lane. There have been several fatal accidents right in front of my neighborhood. My neighborhood was completely flooded last year. Allowing additional commercial properties would lead to additional flooding. We had flooding with Ian, and I couldn't even get out of my own property. I realize that I am only one person and up against many monetary income that the county would receive with this. I ask you to seriously consider my comments, and at the very least, do not allow an additional entrance onto the 426 for this project, and some type of sound barrier should be built around it. Thank you for your time.
Ms. Wilson, can you show us, pointing your property on the map, please?
Yes. I live right here.
Okay.
The entrance is right here, so the site is pretty much directly across. Right now, the entrance for where the other properties are just, I guess, a little north of this, there's one entrance. We'll use this as a turning lane. So for me to even try and get out, because I can only take a right out of my neighborhood. I'm not allowed to cross over. So you're talking about I make a right, they're always making U-turns.
Okay.
If you put another entrance over here, that's directly across.
Thank you. All right, very good. Applicant, would you like to rebut?
Thank you. Again, for the record, Ken Fisher. So the property to our north, you are correct. We don't actually have access onto 426. Correct. So we don't actually have any right-of-way frontage. From my understanding, the property to the north, part of their development order was they had to give access to not only our property, but the property to our immediate south. Somehow, whenever the easement got done, the property to our immediate south really doesn't have access. They have like a 3 or 4 foot access, which is not enough to get a car in there. So part of what we are doing is we're going to be giving them access through ours, along our frontage, so that they can have access because they've been kind of landlocked. So we are doing tow trucks, but I had to learn a lot myself about tow trucks. This is only an emergency tow truck. So apparently, one of the examples, so all of the surrounding cities, they're the service provider for emergency vehicles for accident scenes. And one of the, I believe it's City of Oviedo, they have to be within a 5-mile radius of the intersection of 426 and Red Bug Lake. So they aren't the towing facility that's going to go out and pick up cars that are parked illegal. This is a towing facility for emergency vehicle. So part of their warehouse, part of the building that we're doing is for the forensics for these said emergency, the crash scenes. So I don't want this to be like, and we went over this with staff in some detail, this isn't a normal where you see the piles and piles of cars and you come pick up your car because it got towed because you parked illegally. This is for emergency response. I believe they're the service provider for the county as well as several of the cities around. So this isn't that type of a tow facility. It's just for emergency crash scenes. And so the access that the property to the north was required as part of their development was to give these parcels access. And so that is our only form of access, is through this driveway. There is an agreement already in place. There is an access agreement for this, and that is the only way for this property to have vehicular access is utilizing the existing access that was required by the county whenever they came in for development. So,
I've got a
Go ahead.
question. All right, so are you going to put any kind of fence up around this property?
yeah, we've got a 6-foot perimeter fence going up.
Okay. Second question, are these going to be the large-scale tow trucks or just small flatbed jar
No,
frame?
these are the smaller ones. And it's because the response time, I'm not sure where all he has the facilities, but you've got to be within that 5-mile radius. I guess Red Bug 426 is a good example because that's where apparently a lot of accidents are. So, when we first met with the county was no tow yards until we've all found out more about this is for emergency response and getting to the emergency scenes and the accident scenes to remove the vehicles.
Okay. I have a
And-
third question.
Sure.
This site, now, is it going to be completely paved?
No, up in the front, we'll have the pavement for the regular, employees that stay there. But in the back, in the back where the vehicles will be, if they're not inside the building for forensics, they're not there very long. They're not long-term storage. It's nothing like that. These are just the pickups, and then you get another tow truck that then takes them to a shop. Ever how long that takes, a day, a few hours, a few days, but this isn't a long-term storage solution type of a tow yard facility.
But I do have one concern. If these vehicles come in from an accident scene and they're parked on the dirt surface out there and there's fluid leaks coming out of them, such as oil, transmission fluid, all the things that would leak, it would be leaking into the aquifer. There's no provisions for any kind of catch system or a grease trap or anything like that on the property?
We don't have a grease trap. We can definitely look at that when we move to the next step and doing some kind of an additional treatment with the pond system and having it flow, and whether put in an oil water sand separator.
Yeah, I have a real concern with that.
Yeah. We can definitely, we've done those before for mechanic shops.
Any other questions of the applicant?
Chairman, is it okay if I interject one thing related?
Yes, and I think we have some questions of staff. anyway,
Okay, sure.
so- All right, thank you very much.
If there's certain concerns that the board has related to the development, we can add additional conditions into the development order.
I would like to see them have to actually pave this whole site and do some kind of catchment system for these vehicles being towed in with fluid leaks. I think it would be a responsible thing to do with the neighbors and the people that live across the street. I think just draining it into the dirt is not what I would call responsible.
We, to add to that comment, we do have the hazard mitigation section of the county where we can give the contact information to have our applicant work with them to see what catchment for the fluids on these big vehicles and what we can do to prevent it as well. We can
Yeah.
have that.
Yeah, is there any way we can table this until we get those answers?
I mean, that's a decision of the board. I mean, whether you want to continue the item.
Okay. I have a problem with the access. If, I understand that maybe in the past, the county was concerned about having too many accesses or too many curb inlets in, on 426, but if the Oviedo Commerce Center owns the portion that's in front of this property in between this and 426, couldn't there be a different access worked out between these two neighbors, or the county wouldn't allow that?
To
Well,
engineering.
they will have to cut through the trail, that's for certain. Now, the second thing is they will have to dedicate a new cross-access easement because it will still go through this property that is actually developed now.
But it could go direct, not in front of their tenants. Correct? I mean, like
No, because
directly.
they will cut into the triangle, so I don't know if we don't have, we can zoom in, so we can,
You could share that on the overhead.
Here,
like, we can share on this.
here, I got, here. You want this?
Change to document camera.
So these are the two properties, right? The third one already has access, has a driveway from 426.
See
So the
that?
crossing access is over here. Basically, they will have to cut this property like that. It's still owned by that development to the north.
I know, but
So-
perhaps they would prefer something that just comes out.
And that will require, again, permit application to DOT, and DOT will have to approve it. So it's not a county road.
Oh, I see.
426 is a state road.
State road.
So is this the same trail bikeway?
The trail is right in front.
Okay, is this the same one that goes right across the
Correct.
Home Depot entrance?
Yes, it
and-
goes over to the bridge and then across
Okay,
Red
all
Dog
right.
Lake, yes.
Are there any safety measures considered having these tow trucks towing vehicles, broken-down vehicles across the trail for pedestrians and bikers, children?
Well, at the trail, there's already a stop sign, I believe, for the bikers. So there's like a crossing already provided, and that's a typical standard that the Parks and Recreation Department actually uses. It's part of our manual as well.
Okay.
So this will require basically putting another one. If another, let's say another access is allowed, it will require another stop like that and another cross.
Easy. Okay. And also, this might be one for Annie. Actually, I just lost my train of thought. Anybody else first? I'll come back with it. Completely off of traffic. I had something else. Anybody else first?
Are there any plans to improve
To improve.
the access through that easement? And I don't
To
know
get
that you
to-
can
To get to the
improve.
site, are you
Yeah.
talking about?
Yes.
I believe the access is already 24 feet wide. What they're going to do, they're just going to extend that going inside their property and then provide additional cross-access easement, as the applicant said earlier, for the property to the south.
Okay.
Okay,
Thank
I'm
you.
sorry, Annie. Obviously, the future land use of all these parcels was
industrial.
industrial, right?
Yes.
Is this considered to be any type of heavier industrial than maybe what otherwise could be proposed there? Or that the neighbors should have otherwise been able to expect?
I mean, there's many different permitted uses. I would consider this probably an M1A, which is a lighter industrial, a tow truck site. I don't know off the top of my head some of the uses, but
So this is considered lighter industrial?
yeah.
So really, the problem is with the access?
No, with car storage.
Okay.
I'll go back to my comment. It's probably a little heavier than lighter industrial due to the car storage outside.
Any other questions, staff? Do we have, Dan?
No.
Do we have a motion for tabling until we get the
I would like to
information
make
on
a
the hazardous
motion to
material?
table it until they come up with some type of site improvement that will contain everything they're towing in.
Second.
I just think it's irresponsible to tow these vehicles in and drop them in a dirt lot and have no idea what they're leaking.
Okay. And I think also what Commissioner Smith is talking about is not the leakage just from the tow trucks, but also from cars that have been in accidents,
That's
of course,
what
right?
my main concern
Right.
is.
And we
yeah.
have a second?
We have a second.
Sorry, we would rather a denial versus a continuance.
I
If that's-
understand. I think what the board is wanting are some answers, actually, before we pass this on.
I think we can give those answers. If we've got an issue with contaminant, we don't mind doing an oil sand separator. That is something that we'll look at final engineering. That's not typically something that we would look at zoning, and that's something that the staff is going to be looking at as well.
Okay, we have a motion on the table right now. Is, everyone can take that into consideration? If
We have a motion
that's
and
an
a
option
second.
for them. So we'll vote on this motion, and if you agree with the oil sand separator, we can vote it down. Board discussion, Commissioner Smith?
Excuse me, can I make one comment before you?
Not
go?
at this
No.
time, I'm sorry.
Thank
Sorry,
you.
public comments
All right,
closed.
Thank you.
We are considering a rezone here, right? And we clearly have an easement that has existed. So I'm questioning why we're continuing it if it's zoned properly and there is
Being zoned
access.
specifically for a towing operation, if it was just being zoned with no future,
What-
not knowing what was
what
going to
if-
go in there, it
what
might be
if-
different.
Okay. What if Massey comes in there and has a lot of vans and trucks coming in and out? I can create that situation with a lot of different businesses.
I do wonder
I
why
just wanna
Massey's not
consider.
here, because I think that they are the most affected.
I just use them as a tenant example, but we can put it to a vote. I just want to consider what we're really voting on here.
Yeah.
I don't know if it's, it hasn't gone through design.
That argument is why I wouldn't support denying it, but continuing it until we get some answers on some of the environmental concerns, I don't think is asking too much, personally.
Okay. Any other board discussion before we take a vote? So this vote is specifically to table until
We get some additional
the
information.
next
yeah.
meeting,
Yeah.
additional information as to, and if we don't agree with tabling it and we want to take another vote as to up or down, then you would
And-
vote opposed, okay?
Madam
So-
Chair, is this a continuance to the next planning and zoning meeting? Okay.
A date certain, next meeting.
Yeah.
Okay, so restate your motion, please.
I'd like to make a motion to move, to have a continuance to the November meeting.
Okay, and Tammy, we had Commissioner Lopez second. So, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Opposed.
Opposed.
Opposed. Okay, that one fails. Do we have another motion or any further board discussion on an up or down?
I'll make a motion to recommend the Board of County Commissioners deny the ordinance enacting a rezone from A1 agriculture to PD planned development on approximately .92 acres located on the west side of West State Road 426, approximately 800 feet north of Connection Point.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed?
Opposed.
Opposed.
You seconded and opposed? I want to just clarify the votes. So this was a vote to recommend denial to the Board of County Commissioners. Okay.
Might wanna
Can we do
roll call.
can we do a roll call?
Yeah.
Can we do deny Commissioner Smith?
Opposed.
Okay.
Opposed.
Commissioner Lopez? Okay. Commissioner Lorenz?
Aye.
Aye.
Commissioner Smith? Okay. I'm an aye. So then we will recommend denial to the Board of County Commissioners. And I think I was the one that was wrong, not you, on that one. Confused there.
We got there in a roundabout way.
Okay, very good. We'll move on to the next agenda item. which is Wheelie Acres Administrative Small Scale Future Land Use and Rezone. Maya Athenis presenting.
Good evening. For the record, Maya Athenis, Senior Planner for the Planning and Development Division. This is a request to consider a small-scale future land use map amendment from commercial to low-density residential and to rezone from A1 agriculture to R1A single-family dwelling for 11 existing single-family residential lots on approximately 3.7 acres located north of West State Road 426 and southeast of State Road 417. The county is acting as the applicant for this project on behalf of a group of citizens who signed a petition requesting the future land use designation be changed from commercial to future land use, to low-density residential to better reflect their established community of single-family residential homes. The properties in question include the entire Wheelie Acre subdivision and one other parcel directly adjacent located in unincorporated Oviedo. The Wheelie Acre subdivision is an antiquated plat per Section 15.3A1 of the Seminole County Land Development Code, having been platted in 1957. The homes were permitted to be built on the subject lots since the lots are vested per the plat. In addition, some of the homes were built prior to the 1960s, before zoning was established in Seminole County. The Wheelie Acre subdivision currently has 10 individual lots. The 11th parcel included in this proposal is also a legal nonconforming lot with the same zoning classification and future land use designation. The subject parcels do not currently meet the 1 acre size requirement for the A1 zoning district, and the residential uses are not consistent with the commercial future land use. The proposed future land use map amendment and rezone would bring the parcels more into compliance. Seminole County Development Services staff held a community meeting on May 16, 2023 at St. Albans Church to provide an opportunity for property owners of the subject properties to provide feedback. There were 2 residents that attended the community meeting. The subject property owners were sent certified return receipt letters, and notification was sent through standard mail to property owners of parcels within 500 feet. Staff received certified mailed receipts from the property owners that had not submitted letters of support for the proposal. Staff also distributed informational door hangers to announce the meeting as well. All subject property owners have confirmed notification of the request, and there has been no opposition shown as of this time. After an evaluation of the consistency of the proposal, staff finds the proposed low-density residential future land use designation and R1A zoning classification to be consistent with the comprehensive plan and the Land Development Code of Seminole County. With that, this concludes my presentation. Staff recommends the Board of County Commissioners adopt the proposed ordinance enacting a small-scale future land use map amendment from commercial to low-density residential, and adopt the ordinance enacting a rezone from A1 agriculture to R1A single-family dwelling for 11 single-family residential lots on approximately 3.7 acres located north of West State Road 426 and southeast of State Road 417.
Thank you. In this case, the county is the applicant. So do we have any questions of the applicant or the staff?
It's a little unique.
Yes, it is. Yes, it is. I have no question.
I don't have any.
Any? Okay. Motion? Or board discussion?
You ready for a motion?
Yes.
I'll make a motion to recommend that the Board of County Commissioners adopt a proposed ordinance enacting a small-scale furniture land use map amendment from commercial to low-density residential, and adopt an ordinance enacting a rezone from A1 agriculture to R1A single-family dwelling for 11 single-family residential lots on approximately 3.7 acres located north of West State Road 426 and southeast of State Road 417.
I'll second that motion.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? All right, seeing none, the motion carries. At this time, we'll close on our public hearing items and move on to a work session. Item number 3 is the evaluation and appraisal report based comprehensive plan amendments. Tyler Reed and Eliza Harris Giuliano presenting.
Good evening. For the record, Tyler Reed, Senior Planner for Planning and Development Services. I am introducing the Evaluation and Appraisal Report, Year-Based Amendments Work Session. The EAR and EAR-based amendments incorporated the results of a public visioning process which took place last year and which was referred to as Envision Seminole 2045. The EAR-based amendments are based on the evaluation and appraisal report of the comprehensive plan that was approved by the Board of County Commissioners on November 15th, 2022. This year, the Board of County Commissioners had 2 work sessions on August 8th, 2023 and September 12th, 2023. A community meeting took place on August 17th, 2023. Our consultant, Eliza Harris-Giuliano, is here from Kimley Horn to present the latest update to the EAR-based amendments, and staff will be on hand to answer any questions. Thank you. We're going to load up the PowerPoint for you for the presentation.
Bear with us for 1 second, I apologize.
Lazy because you usually take care of it. So it should-
Talk about the Windows sound in general?
With the
or-
Windows sound, never a good sound.
I think I got it.
Yeah.
How do you guys do it? Thank you for your patience. My name is Eliza Harris-Giuliano. I've been working as a consultant for the county throughout the Vision and EAR process. Recapping a little bit of what Tyler talked about, the Envision Seminole 2045 Vision Report was accepted by the commission back in November of 2022, and along with that came an evaluation and appraisal report, which was transmitted to the state and also approved by the board at that time. So because we're about a year out from that, the comprehensive plan amendments resulting from that evaluation and appraisal report have to be adopted by this November. This is where we are in the process of since the vision plan. So we've had 2 work sessions with the board, a community meeting, and this is of course, the LPA work session. This will come back to you for a formal recommendation. We also have another work session with the board coming up next week, and that'll be our final work session with the board. This was based on a significant public engagement effort that took place in 2022. We had over 300 in-person participants as well as over 2,000 online participants in surveys that resulted in 5 vision goals. Those vision goals were protect wildlife, maintain rural places, grow walkable, get active, and be green. So those vision goals are informing the updates that you see in front of you.
So shifting gears a little bit, as we're doing this evaluation and appraisal report, we also recognize more practical issues that need to be updated as part of the plan, such as some cleanup items. There are issue sections in the comprehensive plan today that can cause some confusion because they're not really policies, they're just sort of a background information that isn't terribly useful today. So we're removing those from the plan as part of the update. There's also minutia like department names that have changed over the last decade, cleaning some of those cleanup items. And then there's a big picture reorganization of the future land use element for clarity, and I'll get a little more into that. We've also essentially organized the future land use elements based on some thematic elements to help the community understand what these different pieces of the comprehensive plan are doing and how they interact with each other. And we've got 4 big categories: nature and recreation, community building, administration, and resource management. So that doesn't change any policies, it just changes a little bit of how we communicate to the public, and each of those will have a little introduction explaining how the comp plan serves the community. Now, talking about the future land use element in particular, which is where a lot of the changes that are resulting from the vision are being implemented, the current comprehensive plan is organized around the How Shall We Grow vision from 2007. That was the regional growth vision that was put together by myregion.org, involving, I believe, 7 different counties that came together to work on a plan that came up with 5 goals: conservation corridors, countryside, centers, and centers. Property rights was added later by the state. But so right now, the future land use element is organized around those goals from 2007. What we're recommending now doesn't change the intent of that, but we felt that the organization, A, was based on a vision that wasn't specific to Seminole County, and B, created some confusion and overlapping policies that weren't really helpful. So as you can see by the arrows that are pretty complicated, it's because we're trying to make something more organized out of something that wasn't organized, what we would see in the most optimal way. So what we're doing now is organizing the future land use element around those vision goals. But to avoid making the mistake that was made back in the previous comp plan, we haven't strictly adhered to those goals. In some cases, we've combined them so we don't end up with that kind of repetition that we saw in the old plan. Now, the second thing is, right now the future land use element only has 1 goal. There's no rule that says you can only have 1 goal, and in fact, we know we're trying to meet lots of different goals through the future land use element. The existing goal is also, again, very much based on the regional vision. Again, not anything negative about the regional vision, but now we have our own vision that's more specific. So as part of this rewrite, we're recommending 7 goals that are organized primarily around the vision, but there's also some other elements that are more practical: coordination of investments, property rights, and then a management piece that don't directly come out of the vision, but essentially provide a house for the policies that don't fit neatly into the vision categories. So I'm going to keep bringing up those vision goals. So as we talk about the first goal we're going to discuss in detail, that comes out of the vision goals: be green and protect wildlife. The future land use element goal that results from that we've called wildlife, nature resources, and sustainability. And this is the verbiage: to protect wildlife, scenic beauty, and human health, with a focus on natural habitats and natural resources. I won't read the whole thing. One thing that I do like to point out is that we have scenic beauty in there. And beauty sounds like kind of a subjective idea. Happens to be in the state of Florida Constitution. So we think we've got really good backing there to talk about scenic beauty as being part of the comprehensive plan. So under that goal, we've introduced some new objectives. In some cases, those objectives are just organizing existing policies, again, in a more comprehensible way. We've also added some new policies, specifically around habitat, dark skies, and green buildings. And then previously, this was housed, a lot of these policies were housed in an umbrella that included historic and archaeological resources, which are still important but don't make sense given the new structure. So those have been moved to enhance existing places. So one of the new objectives is natural lands and wildlife. We have another one focused on water resources and preservation. And part of that wildlife policy is about connecting to the Florida Wildlife Corridor. That's a statewide effort that's been endorsed by the Florida legislature. This was something that we identified as part of the vision planning process that was important to include in the update. Additionally, it's consistent with essentially the science around the importance of connected habitats. Having isolated habitats isn't nearly as valuable from a conservation standpoint as having habitats that are connected. The Wekiva River Protection Area is also a separate objective under this. Essentially, this is really a reorganization and clarification exercise. It doesn't significantly change any of the policies, but we had gotten feedback that this section had some sections that were confusing, so it's essentially been cleaned up. But the intent is not to have changes to the kinds of development that are permitted or what's required. Looking into green building practices, there was already an FAR bonus for green building practices embedded within the urban centers and corridors overlay. We're recommending expanding that to not quite the whole county, but to the urban parts of the county, excluding the rural area and the river protection areas, and adjusting it. It was a raw 0.2 FAR bonus. That doesn't make sense in some of the lower zones, so we're looking at instead as a 20% bonus. We also have added a policy around electric vehicle readiness under that green concept. Again, under the sustainability piece, we've added policies that really reinforce what's the county's already doing and some of what's happening in the Land Development Code update that you've already reviewed around Florida-friendly, encouraging, not requiring, but encouraging native vegetation, and updates to the tree preservation section, responsible use of fertilizer and pesticides. And what that means essentially is if you put the right plants in the right place, you don't have to apply as much chemical management to get them to be successful. So we also, this is not in the future land use element, but it's a coordination item with the sanitary element. There was a change in state law this session which increased the requirements for septic tanks to do a better job essentially of getting out some of those, the nitrogen and keeping those out of our water system. So enhanced septic tanks are required by the state on lots less than or equal to 1 acre in the areas that you see in this map in the blue. So those are the BMAP areas, the Basin Management Action Plan areas, essentially areas that feed into water bodies that are impaired. That covers a good section of the county, but not the whole county. So as part of this, we're still having an ongoing conversation with the board on whether or not this requirement should be extended into the white areas, those areas that are not governed by this, where it's not required by the state. And a significant amount of that is in the East Rural area. Now remember, this is only required on lots less than or equal to 1 acre. So what that means is that in the East Rural area, it doesn't necessarily apply to a lot of properties where you're going to have larger lots, but it might apply, for instance, if somebody is clustering their development onto smaller lots, then they would be required to meet that. We're also discussing a requirement that any cluster development would be required to use the enhanced septic.
Are you taking questions now, or are you waiting until the end?
We'll wait to the end.
Okay.
So shifting to the other end of the spectrum, we're talking about conservation. Now we're talking about infill and redevelopment, grow walkable communities, and support active lifestyles. Those were the vision goals, which moved into the comprehensive plan goal to grow walkable active places in centers and corridors. So we're focused here on efficient use of land, providing housing choices, and enabling multimodal transportation options, all within an economically vibrant community. The unincorporated area is anticipating about, based on the numbers that we looked at when we started this process, which that was back in 2020, anticipating about 40,000 residents in the unincorporated area. And the projections show that that can be accommodated under the existing framework. What do we mean by the existing framework? What that means is not increasing density or intensity in the rural area. It means not directing development towards the Wekiva or Econ River protection areas, but really trying to focus development in the dark blue there, which is the more urban portions of the county, particularly with a focus on redevelopment and infill in centers and corridors, which is a defined concept within the comprehensive plan. So the map that you see on the right there, where you see the pink and the blue, the pink is the corridors as they exist today in the comprehensive plan, and the blue is the centers that exist today in the comprehensive plan as an overlay. What we found as we looked at this was that while these policies around centers and corridors have been in the comprehensive plan for about a decade, there hasn't been a lot of activity, development activity in response to those. So as we look forward to absorbing those 40,000 residents and all the other uses that would be associated with that, if we don't see some of that activity go into these centers and corridors, it becomes either a situation where we're using up every acre of developable land in that dark blue area outside the rural area, or we're not meeting the goal at all. So as part of the charge out of the vision plan, we noted the need to simplify those policies to make them more accessible to the development community, to rethink the densities if it's not enough of a match to what development can happen in those centers and corridors. That's obviously a barrier. And there's some other issues around coordinating infrastructure and developing redevelopment plans that go beyond the comprehensive plan. So what's already happening, as I mentioned, what's already come before you is the LDC updates that include the mixed-use corridor development district, as well as the missing middle alternative standards that would enable more mixed-use development and more medium-density residential development, which is commonly called the missing middle, and the diagram on the bottom left there. One of the things we looked at as we were looking at the centers and corridors is that there's a pretty large number of smaller lots. We found around 400 lots, over 400 lots within the overlay that were under 3 acres. Many of them are vacant. They're too small for some of the bigger projects that a national apartment builder might come in and develop. So we wanted to do some analysis around those small lots and see what might be possible and how those could participate in this issue of addressing the housing need as well as other needs. These are some illustrations of the type of development that could happen on these smaller lots. We find that these smaller developments often are more attainable for a number of reasons. One, it may be that it's accessible to build these where somebody would own a very small, even be part of building it and then live in it. There's also the opportunity to do some of these smaller projects under residential loans rather than commercial loans. And then when you have 4 or 5 tenants or 2 or 3 tenants, you are less likely to just raise the rent. You can't absorb a 2 or 3% turnover the way you can in a large apartment complex. Essentially, if you're in a large apartment complex, they raise the rent. They know they're going to lose some people. Well, if you're a small apartment owner, you're more likely to keep good tenants rather than continually raising the rent. So by a very kind of gross estimate, we said that these small sites could absorb as much as 4,500 new units of this more compact variety. And if you go including live works or small commercial, they could accommodate another 900 small businesses. We also brought in some economic analysis on this to try to evaluate, again, why development wasn't happening under the current regulations. So the centers and corridors overlay today maxes out at 20 units an acre. And if you look on the chart there, that's not financially viable according to the analysis that we got from our market analyst. And that's the highest you can get. That's if you check all the boxes within the bonus criteria. So it makes it pretty clear why people haven't been using the program. So it doesn't make sense to keep it on the books if it's not going to be a program that anyone's going to want to take advantage of. As we're getting up to 30 units, we start to see some financial viability. On the far end, 50 units an acre, that's something really attractive that's going to encourage investment. So we also did some renderings of what this might look like in a specific context. And this is, if you watch the presentation next week at the board, we'll get into a little more detail on this than we have time to get into today. So that was the financial analysis of the smaller projects. We also did financial analysis of the larger projects, so in the 15-acre range. And here we actually looked at surface and structured parking. On the smaller projects, you're not going to have room for a parking structure, so it's a non-issue. But we did look at structured parking and non-structured. So structured parking is in green, and the surface parking is in blue, and that really changes the development economics. So you start to see viable projects in the 30-unit an acre range, in the surface parking scenario, and more like the 50 to 60 acre range on the structured parking scenario, and really attractive projects, again, higher than that. So this is informing the larger project densities that we're looking at. So this is where what we're proposing relative to the mixed-use development land use. So there's some complexity here because there's properties that have MXD land use that are located within the corridors, and then there are properties that have other land uses that are also located in the corridors, and we're dealing with both of these at the same time. So if it's a little confusing, it's because it's a little confusing, and I apologize. So right now, the only way that you can take advantage of the MXD land use, which is the mixed-use land use in Seminole County, is by doing a planned development. And there's some drawbacks to that. For one thing, from the staff side, it means that every project has to be negotiated, and there's no standards to point to. And from the development side, there's some unpredictability. So we're not taking that option away, but we are adding what we've been talking about, which is the mixed-use corridor development zoning that people can rezone to in a more straight zoning fashion, as well as the missing middle alternative standards, which provide a range of options, some requiring rezoning, some not requiring rezoning, depending on how intensive a project that you're proposing. With that, we're proposing increased densities. Under the current scenario, the 30 units an acre is the maximum density that's permitted. We're suggesting that it would go up to 60 units an acre if you do a parking structure or if you're on a smaller lot. There are already bonuses in the comprehensive plan for workforce housing, both for FAR and a density bonus for affordable and low-income housing, and we're not proposing to change that, so you'd be able to do that on top of the increased density and intensity. Now, switching over to the urban centers and corridors overlay, which again overlays over most of the MXD properties that exist today in the county. This is a little bit different scenario, but essentially we're using some of the same tools. So we're still pointing to the MUCD zoning standards and the missing middle zoning standards that you would have to abide by, as well as some additional bonus criteria in order to access this program. And it would come with higher densities and intensities that would hopefully attract some of that development that was envisioned by the plan. So going up to 75 units an acre on the density side and 1.5 FAR on the intensity side. Now that's in those FLU districts that have a commercial or non-residential designation. There's also properties in these corridors that have a residential designation. So and actually this is changing, this has changed since we put together this PowerPoint in preparation for the board. We were looking at a maximum of 50 units an acre on those residential FLUs, and we've now taken that down to 35 units an acre based on further analysis. But the residential FLU districts, you would only be using the missing middle standards, and there's a considerable amount of additional standards that go with that missing middle piece, including looking at your underlying zoning or your underlying future land use, and essentially moderating what you can do within that based on your underlying future land use. So if you're an LDR, you maybe can only do something like, let me see if I have the chart in here. Nope, I don't have the chart in here, sorry. But essentially, if you're an R1, you can do cottage courts, which is essentially smaller single-family units on smaller lots, whereas if you go into MDR, you can do a much wider range of uses, duplexes, quadplexes, triplexes, considerably larger range. We also, based on feedback of the board, are taking a second look at the compatibility standards and making sure that we're dealing with the adjacencies in an appropriate way versus what's there today. And as I say, packing a lot in here because we did this in 2 presentations for the board, so trying to move through it quickly. We did add an objective, or we kept the objective on support of multimodal transportation network, as well as some existing policies related to that. We added a new policy specifically addressing transit-served development, and essentially, if they're, to the extent that properties are considered transit-served, I think it's pretty obvious if you're within a certain distance of Sunrail, you are transit-served. But when you talk about bus system service that can range from an hour headways that doesn't come every day, all the way up to much more robust service, there's a big range there. And so to be considered transit-served, what we're proposing is that you would have to have 15-minute or better headways and be in a quarter mile of that service. That's not something that you see a lot of in Seminole County today, but that is what would be required to really have robust transit service for some of this higher density development to be considered transit-served. Okay, switching gears again to rural places. So again, this is a new goal, but it really encompasses a lot of existing policies around preserving rural lifestyle and landscapes, including agricultural and resource-based businesses. So I'm not going to go through all the language, but this essentially modifies some of the language that already exists with relation to the East Rural area and recognizes that there are other areas in Seminole County that are also considered rural by the community and by the county, without changing the applicability to the East Rural area. There's also some cleanup to do relative to the East Rural area definitions because of the differences between the original plan and the charter boundary and what happened in the interim. So we're cleaning some of that up as part of this process and clarifying some of the review standards, but no real substantive changes to the existing policies in the East Rural area. But we have added a general objective about preserving rural character in appropriate areas of Seminole County, along with a separate objective just for the East Rural area and the policies associated with that. And then we've added a new objective about essentially the economics of rural places. So this deals with the county supporting and encouraging the continuation of agricultural and rural businesses, as well as the kind of nature-based businesses that help keep these areas going, that make sense for larger acreage properties that continue to provide that scenic beauty that we all love. They need to stay viable businesses in order to keep that character to the extent that they're non-residential. We also have been working on the recognition of the rural enclaves. So this is there have been a number of different communities that have either expressed interest or that staff has recognized as being essentially rural areas that are within the more urban parts of the county, but they're very rural in character. They may have dirt roads. They are on septic. There may be very large lots. And so we're adding some policies to just start the process of recognizing these areas, but not mapping any of them at this point. It requires further study to identify what the standards would be, which might vary by these different areas. Some of them are up against natural preserves, some of them are surrounded by infrastructure, and also to try to map out, are these designations essentially permanent, or are they a transitional period? And that might vary depending on, again, why they're being recognized as a rural enclave. We've also looked at cluster development policies. This is another area where we're delving into a little more detail. We've already done some cleanup throughout the future land use element to essentially try to, one of the goals is clustering is mentioned a lot of times in the plan, and it's mentioned in a lot of different contexts. So one of the things that we've done is really remove clustering from the conversation around urban plan developments. To the extent that density is moved around essentially in urban plan developments, that is something that makes sense. That's part of the reason that plan developments exist as a tool, but it doesn't create the rural clustering or natural clustering that people expect when we're using that terminology and based on the policies in the plan that are talking about preserving natural environments or preserving rural character. So we want to separate those two things because they're really very different conversations. As we're talking about that rural side of it, We're being consistent with the Florida Wildlife Corridor, where they do recognize agricultural and working lands that are open lands as part of that landscape that actually is supportive of wildlife. But there are some outstanding issues that we're still working through, including that there's language in some areas of the comp plan that talk about a minimum of 1 acre, some areas that talk about a ½ acre within the rural area. Just kind of clarify, where does the county want to go on that? They're not directly in conflict, but there's a need to really reconcile and pick a direction there. Similarly, there's been discussion around the cluster bonus in the A10, which allows you to have potentially up to double the density, which would mean 1 per 5, so still not a terribly high density, in return for preserving about 80% of the land. So that's something that we're framing up for the board at the meeting next week to have a continued discussion on. Finally, agritourism. This is an area where there's an existing policy that sets up a board, but it doesn't really talk about agritourism. And agritourism is an issue in the county. It's something that it both is something that the county wants to support because it does help to maintain those rural lands, but it also is an important area to be clear about what's truly agriculture and what's when uses are trying to kind of piggyback on that agritourism policy in ways that don't make sense. So we've essentially looked at the Florida statutes, incorporated language that's very consistent with the Florida statutes for this new agritourism policy, and then separated out the Agricultural Advisory Board into its own policy. And that concludes the presentation.
Thank you. Questions of staff and the consultant? Commissioner Lopez?
Yeah, Dick, going back to the septic, the sanitary element phase of this. Gotta find my notes here. Okay, so you're looking to make some amendments to the plan for lots greater than a ½ acre?
So it's less than or equal 1 acre. So 1 acre.
Less than 1 acre, you're going to want an enhanced septic system. Can you explain a little bit more on what's considered an enhanced septic system?
Sure.
Because what I know about them, some of those systems can cost up to like $30,000, $40,000, $50,000.
So we do have more detail that we can make available about the costs. There's a range of opportunities for the type of, you get to choose which system you get, and there's some that are on the lower side and some that are on the more expensive side, including passive systems, which are very comparable in cost to the conventional systems. The catch with the passive systems is that they have a little bit different land requirements, but to get thank you, Tyler, for jumping in there.
So we do have some of the cost estimates here. So for the advanced system, we have a range from $10,000 to $25,000, and that's for the installation and the unit. And then there's an annual maintenance cost of $475 to $675 for this. Yeah, as compared to, let's see, conventional is $11,000 to $15,900 for the installation and unit, and then the annual maintenance is $100 to $160. The passive is the most expensive, $12,500 to $21,500, with an annual maintenance of $230.
So what's being considered then is that they're asking existing homeowners of
No. So our understanding.
This is just going to be new.
Yeah. So for starters, it's just to reiterate, in all the blue areas, that is state mandated. That's not a decision the county gets to make. The state is mandating these systems on those types of properties. As we understand it, it's only for new permits. So if you have an existing unit, even if you're replacing an existing unit, the state is not requiring those units to be advanced. So it'd only be for new permits.
So when you say new permits, so new construction permits.
New construction.
Not a replacement of a existing
That's my understanding.
system.
It would be new construction.
Okay.
Now, the open question is for the white areas, which are not governed by the state, do we want to meet the state requirements? And one of the ways we frame this up is the blue essentially is those waters that are already impaired. Do we want to keep our unimpaired waters unimpaired? So that's That's one way to
I
frame
just
it.
know in years past, the discussion of septic systems has been
Oh,
going
it's
around.
been around.
Oh, yeah.
It has.
And the Realtor Association has been one of the biggest opponents, but that was more focused on existing systems. So this is truly for new construction permits only.
And the assumption is we can't do anything other than septic in these areas
So there's.
without infrastructure.
Well, there's, within the blue area, there are properties that obviously have connection to central sewer. So this requirement would only be if you're allowed to have septic tank. Because we do have requirements in our comprehensive plan and our code that, for connection requirements. So this would only be if you're eligible to have a septic tank. And I guess the question we have for the board, and where we're going to have further discussion with the Board of County Commissioners on Tuesday, is do we want to expand the requirement for the advanced septic systems to those areas within the rural area, and then there's a small area around Longwood that it's not currently required? Do we want to basically have the same standard, the statewide standard, countywide? And if you would like to provide your input or recommendation, we can move that forward to the Board of County Commissioner, your thoughts on that.
Well, I guess my only thought in regards to the new construction is obviously the more expensive the system, that's going to increase the cost of the construction, increase the overall housing cost in general, which is, well, it's becoming more of a burden, for the average consumer out there.
And the less of economic viability that seems to have been taken into account. But then we just make it even harder by adding, increased provisions in this. Any other questions?
Yeah, I have a question. Where in here are we preserving property rights for the property owners? I didn't really see much. It seems like we're dictating everything that property owner can do, and I don't see any real preservation of property rights in here.
So there is an existing property rights element in the comprehensive plan, and there's also an existing property rights, well, it's not a goal, but there's an existing property rights section in the future land use element, so we've not made any changes to that. That was a fairly recent change to the comprehensive plan to add those. So we're not removing anything, we're just not making any changes to that.
So we're dictating what the property rights are for the individual that owns the property, pretty much.
So the comprehensive plan limits how much development opportunity there is on every property in the county. In many instances, particularly within the walkable and active places, we're significantly increasing the development potential of these properties. Does come with some land development code standards, but generally speaking, by law, generally you can't decrease people's development rights, and we're not proposing to do that.
Other questions of staff and consultant? I saw you taking more notes.
Oh, that's for my own edification.
This is a test.
If not questions, then board discussion.
I'm good.
I'm good.
Is there something that we need to produce, not a vote, but something for?
Not at this point. This is a work session in preparation for the ordinance we'll be bringing forward. So we will be bringing forward a transmittal ordinance for the comprehensive plan amendments to the comprehensive plan. I believe those are scheduled for your next meeting, November 1st. The only other issue that we're going to have further discussion with the board on Tuesday that I'm not sure if you want to weigh in on, one of the questions that we posed to the board is currently within the East Rural area, if you do a cluster subdivision, you still have to maintain the proposed density, but you are allowed to have a minimum lot size of an acre. And so our question to the board is, should that minimum lot size be a half acre? I'm sorry, right now you can do a half acre minimum lot size for cluster, but the question is, do we want to allow an acre or a half acre? Because there is some inconsistencies between the land development code and the comprehensive plan related to that minimum lot size for clustering.
I agree 100%. I think we really got to clean up the language because, as we all know, we ran into that on the that one piece of property. And I would like to see a real good clarification of what we consider cluster, because I read into it, and there's just a thousand different variations of what a cluster can be termed. I would like to see that cleaned up. I sort of agree with you with the 1 acre. I like that. You know, if you got, 100 acres of property and you can put 20 homes on there, and you utilize 20 acres for those 20 homes, that also would fall in line with the septic tank requirements now, based on 1 acre lots. I don't think you'd want to see them go any smaller, because then they wouldn't be able to have septic tank systems. So,
Can I clarify? So right now, the enhanced septic is required if you're equal to or less than an acre. If you
Yeah.
are 1.1 acres, you can do a conventional system.
right, and that's where my point is. I think, that way there, the homeowner has an opportunity to save $15,000,
And the ongoing maintenance costs.
And yeah.
Well, and just to clarify, in terms of the differential between the two types of septics, it's really about $3,000 to $5,000 difference.
But the annual maintenance also.
Yeah, and there's a
It's
little
being
bit more
passed
of an
on to
annual maintenance,
a homeowner
Yeah.
later.
Okay.
potentially.
Yeah, I would really like to see that taken care of, though, because I think that's being from the royal boundary. I know that's a
So your
big question.
feedback is you'd prefer to see the minimum lot size in the rural area for clustering subdivisions at 1 acre?
I would like to see 1
Instead
acre.
of the half acre?
That would be my personal, yeah.
But it's not, that still doesn't protect it from a septic. The septic is 1 acre or less, right? So unless it's a little bit more than an acre, you're still not going to keep it out of that.
1.1, I have all options.
Well, and the other thing that...
That's a good
The
option.
other thing
I think
we
I
are
heard that a minute ago.
recommending, currently staff is recommending from an environmental perspective, is that for any clustered subdivision within the rural area, that we would require the advanced septic tanks.
Can we get confirmation on the wording, though? I mean, because I'm looking at it here in this PowerPoint presentation, and it says new permits only. And so I understand the intent might be for new development, new construction, but intent and interpretation of written law and policy could be two very different things.
Yeah, I agree with you, Dan. I mean, a new permit, when you go to replace a septic tank, that's a new permit.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly.
And there will be somebody that will take that out of context, I'm sure.
Yes, we can look into that and verify before the transmittal hearing, when we come before you in November, and make sure that the reference to new permits in Florida statutes is referring to actual new construction, not just a new septic tank permit.
That would be wonderful,
Okay.
yeah.
Good point.
Anything else?
No.
And that is good enough then for this item, correct?
Yes, and we just wanted to make sure that we introduced you to the material before we brought the ordinance before you. It will be a transmittal hearing, and then, so if there's any issues, concerns, we can address those between transmittal and adoption.
Okay, excellent. Then moving into closing business, the director's report. Rebecca, you have anything for us?
Sure. I don't have a lot. We are in the process of hiring, or I wouldn't say hiring, of interviewing candidates for the planning manager position. Kathy Hamill is our acting division manager, so she may be attending the next meeting. And other than that, no new news. Well, I apologize. Actually, one update. The Land Development Code update, the Planning and Zoning recommended approval of the first reading of the Land Development Code amendments and and transmittal of the associated comprehensive plan amendments. We did bring those before the board. They recommended a continuance to October 24th. So hopefully at that meeting, they'll vote to approve upon first reading and transmit the comprehensive plan amendments.
Okay.
Excellent.
All right, thank you.
There's nothing else then?
Thank you.
Meeting adjourned.
Thank you, Desmond, for keeping us out of trouble.